my partners from my former practice were like, you know what, like, when are you going to give up that nuts and berries kind of nonsense and actually come back to real medicine?
Wow.
And my response is, I feel like I'm doing the most real medicine I've ever done.
Welcome to the Fusionary Health Podcast. I have a special guest in store for you today. I am honored to welcome Dr. Sanjay Bhojraj, known widely as Dr. B. And he's a double board certified interventional cardiologist, and he's an Institute for Functional Medicine certified practitioner. For over 20 years, he's navigated the front lines of cardiac interventions. And it's been his experience that, in his life experiences, that have created a powerful shift around how can we prevent heart disease without relying solely on surgery and medicine. And that question birthed Well 12, his evidence-based 12-week program rooted in nutrition, sleep, stress, resilience, and cutting-edge genomics. So welcome, Sanjay, to the podcast.
Dr. Gupta, so nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, Sanjay, we met at a conference called CHS earlier this year and hit it off talking about turmeric, herbs, Ayurveda, how our ancient wisdom, we're both Indian, has so much power and so much knowledge in it. And I remember looking at you and saying, yeah, and you're a cardiologist, and talk about a topic that affects all Indian families at some level. I remember growing up and all the grandparent levels, like that's what affected everyone. So will you kind of kick us off with what led you into doing what you do?
Yeah, well, thanks. Yeah, I mean, definitely. So as you mentioned in the wonderful bio that you have, is that I'm an interventional cardiologist by training. So I lived in the conventional medicine world for about 15, 20 years, not including med school and all that. But as an interventional cardiologist, I was the front line against heart disease, really. I was the interventional cardiologist, for those who don't know, or cardiologists who do the procedural work of putting in stents and balloons and heart valves and all of these procedures through either the wrist or the arteries in the leg. And I lived in that space for so long that I started wondering at one point, why does this even exist, right? Almost universally, everybody says heart disease is a lifestyle related issue, and heart disease should be preventable, but it's not. And in fact, I would get repeat business. So I got to that point in my career where patients who I treated earlier on in my career, despite having normal blood pressure, normal cholesterol, normal blood sugar, which is all the things that we think are important in the conventional world, came back for repeat procedures, right? Repeat business for a doctor in that specialty is not good. We want to keep people away from heart attack. And I said, there's something missing here. I just don't know what it is. And in the conventional training, for those of you, the physicians who are listening from the MD or DO world, is we just don't get a lot of preventative care. Our model is really based on, crisis management, disaster management, what happens when somebody has a hot appendix or has a stroke or a heart attack. And we're really good at that stuff, but we just don't have the framework to keep people out of trouble. And we think that medicines are the only answer. And I had a huge number of patients that had, by all conventional standards, were well controlled, excellent controlled, cholesterol less than that time. The goal was less than 70, blood pressure in the 120 over 80 range, all the numbers numbered, right? All the math, but they were still having issues. And somehow, through a weird set of circumstances, I fell into this online webinar that talked about the functional medicine approach to hypertension. And this was now probably 10 or 12 years ago. So before, I think now functional medicine is much more open and people are much more aware, but this was kind of early on. And I thought to myself, what on earth could these people teach me about hypertension? And I sat in the lecture and was absolutely transfixed. Like, I was like, wow, this is exactly what I was looking for, because they were talking about diet. They're talking about lifestyle. They're even talking about turmeric and chili and garam masala and all these things in our culture that we use as just spices for food. And at the molecular level, how they're affecting cells and reducing inflammation and really leading to a novel concept, which is not just treating issues, but actually healing the underlying issue. And I just thought, maybe this is what I've been looking for. I certified through the Institute of Functional Medicine, through IFM. At that point, we were having in-person conferences. So they had one in Chicago, which is my hometown. And I went thinking, okay, if this is awesome, great. If it's crazy, I can hang out with my old college buddies and my high school buddies, right? No big deal. I'll go see my mom. But it was absolutely amazing, fascinating. And it's like that scene in The Matrix where, Neo is presented with the red pill and the blue pill. And I think they say, once you're out, you can never get back in. And that's exactly what happened to me. Is once I learned the functional medicine model, that approach to patient care, the diet and lifestyle, I was never the same as a cardiologist. And I still did interventional work and all these things, but I incorporated a lot more diet and lifestyle recommendations into my consults. And I realized, what? There's really not a lot of cardiologists doing this. I just need to own this space. So I actually stepped away from my interventional cardiology practice here in Orange County, lucrative practice, all these things, to, as you mentioned, create this Well 12 program, which is really focused on all these foundational functional medicine principles, diet, lifestyle, stress management. But the remarkable thing to me is, as I was doing more education, this was Ayurvedic medicine. I mean, our ancestors created this like 1,000 years ago. So, there's this saying, for entrepreneurs, there's no new idea under the sun. Well, shoot, there's no new idea in medicine either. I mean, this stuff is 1,000 years old.
Yep.
And how did that happen? They didn't have microscopes, or they didn't have stethoscopes for that matter, right? But they came up with this. And, that's why I think that there's so much power to the Ayurvedic approach, because it parallels exactly what we talk about. Things like intermittent fasting, use of herbs, balancing your body, even oral health, right? Talking about oil pulling and coconut oil. For those of you who use mouthwash that's alcohol based, you're crushing your oral microbiome in your mouth. That's where a lot of these bacteria that create nitric oxide, which is a vasodilator that opens up your blood vessels, is created. So we've seen literature where when young college students, because they're the ones that get paid $20 to do things like this, right? Will wash with mouthwash, their blood pressure can shoot up to 28 points. Whereas that doesn't happen with coconut oil, right? Dry brushing, such a simple thing, right? Dry brushing, that's lymphatic massage. That's draining and getting things back into your central system, so you're not getting stagnation of the fluid. I mean, such remarkably kind of delicate and complex concepts with such amazingly simple solutions. I'm in awe, and I really want everyone to incorporate these practices into their daily life, because they can be just so powerful. And with a scientific basis now, we've got data and evidence to show that this stuff works. It works for a reason.
Absolutely. Thank you for validating all of Ayurvedic medicine to me. I love it when practitioners do that, because, for example, I had Dr. Perlmutter on the podcast, and I just sat here and was like, wow, Dr. Perlmutter, who I've loved and admired forever, understands and believes what I believe, which is the power of the herbs, of circadian rhythm, which came from Ayurveda, of lymphatic massage came from Ayurveda. Oral health is gut health is everything. Like, these concepts are intrinsic to Ayurveda. And it's so cool that you see the parallel. I've seen that parallel. As functional medicine rises, I'm like, functional medicine is a beautiful way to say, hey, we're going to dive so much deeper into your diagnostics so that you can see and understand what's wrong with you. But the lifestyle that's going to hold whatever result we give you has to be the Ayurveda lifestyle anyways. And so that fusion is perfect.
Yeah, and it tracks kind of my practice when I have patients in my practice, is that I don't even start with diagnostic testing, to be honest with you, because you're already out of balance, right? I mean, yeah, we'll rule out life-threatening things, and if you have labs, we'll certainly get them. But there's no point in my mind of doing like a stool test, because I know that your microbiome is already out of whack. I can see it on you, right? Like, I know that your lipids are out of whack. I can almost see that in you. I mean, I know what heart attack smells like, right? I know what plaque smells like. So I've been in this universe for 20 years. So I'm so intimately connected to cardiovascular disease that I can see it a mile away. So, we don't need to waste time, I don't think, on diagnostic testing for everybody. It's certainly helpful, if you have a question that you need to solve. But I think the real thing here is aggressive diet and lifestyle interventions. And when you look in the conventional cardiology literature, we have these things called practice guidelines. So our society, American Heart Association, American College of Cardiology, all the the bigwigs get together, and they'll create these guideline documents once every 3 to 5 years on diseases like blood pressure, cholesterol, heart disease, prevention, all of these things. And almost invariably, the first kind of what the highest level of evidence, or the highest strength recommendation, is called the 1A recommendation, is 3 to 6 months of diet and lifestyle intervention, which is, I think, very forward thinking. The problem is is that nobody knows what to do in that space, right? And
Totally.
that's the space that I fill, but really that's the space where I think we've got time for Ayurveda, right? And all of these lifestyle interventions, the foods that you eat, and we think of them in Ayurveda a little bit differently as heating and cooling and all of these things. But when you look at the actual foods that they're recommending, for someone like me, so I think I think a kapha, that's or pitta,
Yeah.
right? That's the one that has strong bones, but is metabolically challenged, right? That's kind of how
That's
I
tough one.
roll.
Yeah.
And like generations of Bhodrajers, we're all shaped the same way. We're just short and stout, right? But the foods that I'm supposed to eat are light, like cucumbers
Dry.
and adding cilantro and cooling and all of these things. But when you look at it from a molecular standpoint, it makes a lot of sense, right? Like I don't want to eat oils and heavy foods because we all have that one person in our family that can probably eat anything, but I look at food and I gain weight, right? So you have to eat these other foods to map your body. And it's just so amazing to me without CT scans, without like scalpels, like how did they come up with these things that actually make sense and now are being backed by science? Intermittent fasting, perfect example, right?
Yeah.
Now we know increases autophagy and increases insulin resistance and all that stuff. That was described 1,000 years ago,
Yeah. Ayurveda talked
right?
all about it. Live on the circadian clock. Sleep
Yeah,
when nature sleeps. And the circadian clock says sleep 10 to 2 on that circadian clock. Hold a big
yeah.
fast. Dinner should be done by 7. You shouldn't be eating any time before 7. Feel free to do your yoga meditation and push that later. So yeah, you're right. It is so cool to see. I mean, whenever I've gone to the Ayurveda conferences over the last decade, the practitioners are all like, "Yep, we already knew turmeric did all that." And we were made fun of and ridiculed when we moved to
Oh,
the United States, those doctors 30 years ago. And they said, now this
yeah,
is so validating. We have to just appreciate that modern science and modern medicine both caught up and said, oh, wow, turmeric can do 50 things. And oh,
yeah.
ashwagandha can do another 50. And look at this botanical garden that these people have that's actually so medicinal and so powerful. So it's
And
fun
like,
to just sit back and watch the validation.
well, and I think about my grandma, right? Like, my mom's a doctor. My mom's mom, not a classically trained doctor, but she fixed stuff, right? And I remember whenever we would go to India for the summer and we'd get sick, even, whatever it was, there was always this box, this wonderful smelling,
Yeah.
earthy smelling box of roots. And she would take the little stone, kind of
Mortar
whatever it
and
is,
pestle.
platform, whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, you make it wet and you rub the thing on there. I can't.
Yeah.
So a little stone kind of grinding platform, whatever it's called, like a cutting board. Put a few drops of water or an oil of some sort or
Yeah.
something, sandalwood, whatever it may be, and then she would grind the root into a paste, and then you'd put it on whatever. Like I remember the first time we went to India when I had every Indian boy has that little weird wispy mustache, right? And my mom didn't let me shave it forever, and I had to use my grandfather's razor to shave. And this is like early on in my career as shaving, and it was like one of those safety razors. The guys will know with the old school where the wings pop out and you put the razor blade in there, and you have to be very meticulous about the angle. I didn't know the angle, and I just went like this and shaved off like a
Oh.
big patch of skin, like right here. It was not great. And in India, I'm like, oh my god, I'm gonna die. Like I'm
Yeah.
gonna get some weird infection. It's gonna be crazy.
Yeah.
And she saw me and she goes, 8 minute, right? Like one
Yeah.
minute, went, found this paste, whatever, put it on there. And here I am thinking I'm going to die. And it healed within like 4 or 5 days. I mean,
Yeah.
it was amazing. So it works, and I always say, this is where the conventional medicine people get crazy with me, but I say, lack of evidence isn't necessarily lack of efficacy, right? Things can be effective without having a randomized controlled trial. And who on earth is going to have a 5,000 person randomized controlled trial of some root from my grandmother's, you know, spice box or whatever about how to fix a shaving injury, right? Or a superficial laceration or whatever, but it worked, right? And I run a podcast called The Curious Cardiologist because I think it's so important to maintain that curiosity and not just be so dismissive as people are. And I think that, you're tapping into this arrogance of Western medicine saying, well, I didn't discover it, so it can't be right. And that's just not the case. I mean, there's millions of years of people in the Indian subcontinent that have practiced Ayurveda and we're still alive, millions of years of people in China practicing traditional Chinese medicine, Africa, Native Americans. I mean, this, I
Homeopathy,
mean, who are the
chiropractic.
ones that brought disease? It was the Europeans, right? The people that didn't have all these traditions.
What a thing to say, but wow, yeah. I mean, into so many parts of the world through
So, I
colonization.
mean, so many parts of the world. I mean, I like, Thomas Cook, I think was the guy, or Captain Cook, whatever his name was, that came to Hawaii, and within like 5 years, 90% of native Hawaiians died, 90% from disease, right? But they had lived, and I'm sure that they were exposed to microbes and all these things, but they had ways to deal with it, right? To heal in line with nature.
Yeah.
And I think if anything, that's what we need to do is put our bodies, as you mentioned, with circadian rhythms and sleep wake cycles and eating and all these things back in line with nature, right? There's a seasonality to the vegetables that are available for a reason, right? Like you have to eat in season with what's locally available. And there's amazing studies. There's one that was done that, if you know Deanna Minnick,
Yes.
she has this in one of her talks. But just I found the article and it fascinated me. They took rats or mice, I can't remember which one it was, the things we do to animals in the name of science, but they put them in kind of either a summer or winter light environment. So in a lab, they took like half of the rats, put them in a short light environment like we would get in winter, or a longer light environment like we get in summer. So after the solstice or whatever, or equinox, and then fed them oranges that were grown either in the winter, meaning that the plants were exposed to a shorter period of light,
Sure.
or in the southern hemisphere, a longer sphere of light, right? And what they found was that the winter rat, well, one way or the other, I can't remember exactly what it is, and in the show notes somebody can look it up. But when you're eating fruit from a discordant climate, so if you're a winter rat eating a summer fruit or a summer rat eating winter fruit, you end up having more insulin resistance.
Wow.
Like the sugar hit you differently. I mean, talk about that. There was another study looking at tomatoes in mice, being tomatoes grown, I think it was more than 5 miles away from the lab where the mice lived, and they were just happy mice running around or whatever, and showed that there was a greater antioxidant effect with locally grown tomatoes than tomatoes that were shipped in from somewhere else.
Wow.
So now, as you start to think about, we all go to the big box stores over the weekend to do our grocery shopping, and I can't think of a time where I went and raspberries weren't available or strawberries weren't available, or
Totally.
these kind of staples that we have, because now in the global food chain, anything is in season anytime, but our bodies are still living where we're living, right? So, it really makes the case for, as I say in one of the talks that I give, you need to know the first name of the person producing your produce, because that means that he or she is local. And be it organic or not, even just eating local has significant unrealized health effects that I think just now the science is starting to flesh out.
Absolutely. And we talk about that a lot in Ayurveda: nutrient density, seasonality, nutrient variety. And I keep drumming that point home in every facet of life that I can to people. But truly, what happens is in the end, you're going to do what's convenient. And you have to
Right.
find a way to really raise the question for yourself: how nutritious do I want my food to be? So, for example, in my house today, Instacart delivered Costco. And in those huge Costco boxes that came to my door that I unpacked, it's the tomatoes, onions, potatoes, organic broccoli, organic spinach. Like, we have a list called What the Children Will Eat. And that's what I order. And that's what we're cooking, because that's easier.
Yeah.
And then for me, if I have time on a weekend and I'm driving by a farmer's market, I'll stop. And that's where I can pick up new and different and interesting. And that's what I will cook my frittatas from and things like that, because I actually am willing to try new and different foods, unlike the rest of
Yeah.
the house. But
Oh,
I recently
yeah.
interviewed a farmer, or I was actually on a farmer's podcast. He's in Ireland, and he was growing 39 different varieties of tomatoes. And I was like, 39 variety? He goes, God, there's so many more than this. This is just 39.
Right.
And I said, you know what? I eat the same tomato from Costco year round, probably for a decade now. There has been
Yeah.
no variety in the tomato I have eaten in my household for 10 years, because that's the way tomatoes come here. Like, I don't have time to go find
That's
tomatoes.
just that's just what we know. And in the program I run, one of the challenges, we have weekly challenges. One of them is for people to eat 25 different fruits and veggies.
Wow.
Right. And it sounds crazy, but it can be done. But as we talk about, in our universe, the microbiome and feeding it different fibers, you need to have a variety of not just color but sources. And so 39 different tomatoes, it's not surprising that there are that many. I think it's just because I remember I grew up in Indiana, and we just had a market. I didn't know that it was a farmer's market, but turns out that's what it was. And I remember seeing like 5 or 6 different like heirloom tomatoes and beefsteak tomatoes, and I don't think Roma tomatoes existed at that time. That's what we eat now. But they had and all these different tomatoes and colors and all these things. And now, like you said, we have just one tomato in my local grocery store, right? It's a Roma tomato. Like if I wanted something else, I'd have to go to some crazy market. And in that, in the homogenization of the fruits of the food supply, as we lose that diversity, it's no wonder that we are getting these diseases of civilization, because you literally in the old school times, you eat what grew, right? And you at different points in time, just like in Ayurveda, with each different season, your diet has to change. And that's because of necessity. The things that grow would change, right? And we just need to return to 1,000 years ago, the lifestyle of 1,000 years ago, and somehow blend kind of our modern lifestyle and conveniences with the wisdom of before. And maybe that's that perfect balance of yin and yang, to make us healthy again. But it's not, the answer is not medicines. And for as much as love putting stents in people, that's not the right answer, right? We need to prevent disease from happening. I say the best way to manage a heart attack is to manage never to get it in the first place. And that's really, I think, where our focus needs to shift.
Absolutely. And I love that idea of 25. I mean, gosh, for the audience today, I would start with 5. But sometimes when I'm traveling or I'm out and about, I'll say, you have to eat something new every day that you have not eaten in a while. And sometimes that'll be kiwi. Sometimes that'll be something else. And I'm like, okay, even if you think you don't like this thing, try it again. It could be that you didn't eat it in a tropical place, or you didn't eat it in the right season, and that's why you didn't like it. But I love something that you shared. You said, if it's not, you said evidence over efficacy, just because
just lack of evidence doesn't mean lack of efficacy, right? So something can be useful. We just don't know. Like parachutes, they work. There's never been a randomized controlled trial of people jumping out of a plane without parachutes, but we know that they work, right? So we don't have evidence, but we know that they're efficacious.
Right. And what's interesting is, in my world, I'm surrounded by surgeons and doctors in my family. And I have had my turmeric supplement company for 10 years now. And the level of commentary I've gotten, like pat on the head, that's so cute, Shivani, that you think turmeric is as effective as painkillers. That's just so cute that you think that. Or, yeah, that's so interesting that you think it's as effective as PPIs. I'm like, it's the British Medical Journal that said so. And my PhD, I kind of sat there for a long time in the science of turmeric. I can tell you without a doubt. And they're like, that is just so cute. And I always say, you know what, we're going to have to agree to disagree. And at the end of my life, I can't wait to be so validated when it's irrefutable. And I'll have finally afforded the double-blind placebo-controlled trials I needed to prove to you, for your mind, that this was all valid and correct. So I love that statement.
But I mean, and there are, specifically for curcumin, the curcuminoids, there are randomized controlled trials already, right? I mean, like I can think of one that was done in the post-surgical heart bypass world that showed that people had a lower risk of heart attack after surgery when they were put on a curcuminoid pre-op than placebo.
Right.
And I think that, we're filling in my grandmother's wisdom with these clinical trials, because now we're understanding, like I said, at a molecular basis, how all of these things work. But I think there's just, again, I think it's part of the arrogance of clinical medicine to say, well, medicines and splitting an atom and immunoglobulins against this, that's the only answer. But somehow humanity survived for how many millions of years without aspirin or Tylenol, right? Why? Because we went to these plants. And even when you look, and the thing that drives me crazy, and I'm sure for you as well, is how many of the medicines that we use on a daily basis actually are from plants, right? Like they were plant-based, like statins, a multi-billion-dollar drug. All this stuff came from red yeast rice, right? And it was purified and improved upon. But the inspo, as my teenagers would say, the inspo was a plant-based chemical, right? I remember that movie Medicine Man. Do you remember that in the 80s with Sean Connery? And he goes into the thing. That was the first time as a kid I remember learning that medicines can come from plants. I didn't have any conception of that before, but I think it's and I face the same thing, probably not to the same degree that you do when I'm doing diet and lifestyle work now, is, people are like, oh, that's really cute, but when are you going to come back? Right. My partners from my former practice were like, you know what, like, when are you going to give up that nuts and berries kind of nonsense and actually come back to real medicine?
Wow.
And my response is, I feel like I'm doing the most real medicine I've ever done. at this point. So yeah, I think it's hopefully the validation for your work happens well before the end of your life. Let me
I
just put
hope
it that
so.
way. We don't want to happen anytime soon. But I mean, I think it's inevitable. It's out there. And now we have people studying this and, people who are like you getting PhDs in Ayurveda and are combining molecular biology and molecular mimicry and now using AI and digital twins and all of these things and for drug discovery, right?
Mm,
And part of that drug discovery is they plug in natural compounds to see what works and what won't work. So I think that it's just a matter of time before you get that validation, or not just Shivani Gupta, but the entire world of Ayurveda
totally.
gets that validation. The problem is acceptance, right? When is the conventional world going to accept that there's an answer other than what we have to offer, right? And that I think is going to be the harder thing, and that's why it's so great now that patients who are really consumers of healthcare are educating themselves. They have things to listen to, like your podcast and your forums, and they have books to read, like the one that you're coming out, because really medicine is just the has so much inertia, intellectual inertia. It takes, from the time something is proven in a clinical paper, often to get into clinical practice, 10, 15 years before there's a change made.
True.
So now when we empower patients of, consumers of healthcare to learn for themselves, and, there's more information available in this little, device that I carry around than in the biggest library in the world, right?
Right.
They can educate themselves. They can learn. People are intelligent. They can evaluate the research and get an understanding of what's going on. Or if not, look at communities like yours or like my community where we have someone who is trained to be able to do this, to say, hey, you know what? This supplement, garbage. Wouldn't give it to my dog or my worst enemy. This one, awesome, right? The science behind it makes sense. So using the communities and building community to help one another, is key. But yeah, we need to get that acceptance. And I think that's going to be the hardest thing for that healthcare community.
I think so too. When I built Fusionary, my supplement company 10 years ago, I was so gung ho that I had to change all of orthopedics. And that was such
Hmm.
a pie in the sky dream. It took about 7 years till I met amazing mentors who said to me, "You are calling on the wrong guy. Like,
Yeah,
consider letting that go for just a minute and calling on every other type of doctor. How about functional medicine, nutritionist, RD, health coach, chiro? Like, why are you not talking to everyone who's already open-minded, who already gets that
right.
turmeric works, and you're just saying, hey, this is why I made this turmeric that's more potent or better." And I took that advice, which changed my whole life. It changed everything. But what's cool is in the last few years, as I've been going to India and diving deeper and deeper into new botanicals that I want to bring into the formulations, there's so much study being done in India on
Hmm.
botanicals at a very pharmaceutical grade level. So
Yeah,
every single factory is out there and they are doing such big tests. They're doing their own clinical tests. So much third party testing is happening. And then, of course, in the United States, we have great third party testing. So we retest everything that they claim they've done. But I think the level of standards and rigor being used on Ayurvedic herbal
yeah,
botanicals at this point is going to make them so much more trustworthy. And you can see that when you go to the functional medicine conferences, because most of the supplement companies who show up know we have to bring in the data on our
yeah,
potency, on our third party, on everything. And so, yes, it's not the same. Of course, it's not the same. It's not an FDA approved thing at all. That's a different department of creation. But over here in the botanical world, I think that every effort's being made. And you even mentioned AI and digital cloning. There's an organization and a team out of Clemson right now that I'm on calls with, and it gets overwhelming because of the level of computation they do. But they're helping me discover, is it curcumin black pepper? Or why would it be curcumin black pepper, boswellia, dry ginger, amla? Why would it be the inflammation relief formula that's more effective than the turmeric gold for systemic inflammation, and why? And what
wow,
else could we add if we wanted to target brain? So you're right, there's so much technology now that can take the same research and science that you've already built and then enhance it. So there's so much
yeah.
movement there right now. Hi, I'm Dr. Shivani Gupta, and I created Fusionary Formulas because I believe everyone deserves a natural way to support their body's health. If you struggle with joint discomfort or stiffness, our Turmeric Gold delivers powerful curcumin in a form your body can truly absorb. It's science-backed with the highest quality ingredients and designed to support your body's natural inflammatory response. Take the next step in your health and wellness journey today. Visit fusionaryformulas.com and use code FusionaryHealth for 15% off. Fusionary Formulas, ancient wisdom, modern science, maximum impact.
Well, and it advances innovation, right? And part of I do med tech consulting, and so I work with a lot of drug and device companies to get things moving. One of the frustrating things is, in the name of patient safety, right, which I totally get, it's just a really painfully slow process to get things approved through FDA, and particularly before when they're calling for like human trials and things. I mean, outcomes for humans take forever, right? Like a trial that runs for a year actually is about a 4-year trial when you talk about the pre-planning and the statistical things and getting patients and looking at outcomes and all of these things. And it really slows down the pace of innovation. So I love that you're using the AI and these digital twins and all of this stuff because it accelerates that discovery so that you can get it into patients' hands faster. And one of the things that is so important to me is just healing people at scale, right? Making things better. And we are just watching kind of not just America, but the world kind of slowly tumble into this metabolic crisis. And, and the GLP-1 meds, while, definitely effective, are not the answer, right? In my mind.
Yeah, they're
And
not a
so
magical
we
solution to a
yeah.
much
And,
bigger
and I mean,
problem of change that has to still happen.
there's still a diet, there's still lifestyle. I mean, the crazy thing is there's no clinical assay available, no clinical test available to measure a GLP-1 level. Like if you went to your doctor, I go to my doctor, and say, you know what, I'm wondering, do I need to take a GLP-1 medicine? Can we check my level? You can't send it to a lab and get that level. And you think about this is a very important hormone, the science is showing that it works in the brain, and the gut, and the this and the that. But if we can't even check a level, how do we know that we're not going to have damage down the road? I mean, think about if like a guy that takes a ton of testosterone, right? Like you get blood issues, you get liver issues, you get all these things, like people who take tons of thyroid hormone, right? They go into thyroid toxicosis and their heart speeds up and they're jittery and all these things. So I get super nervous when we're just pumping super physiologic doses of a very important hormone or peptide, I guess in this case, that in my mind probably exists at a very low level in our body for a reason, right? So we need to, and that's a science. And the stupid thing about this, sorry to be on my GLP soapbox, but
I'm fascinated always
is
by the
that
perspectives.
the crazy thing about this, though, is that people are so willing to accept this almost at any cost because of the outcome, right? Like because they lose weight, and I get it. Like it's difficult for people, but you know the way to do this really properly is to change your diet, to change your lifestyle, to go from away from this one size fits all approach that we have in clinical medicine, move towards this personal approach like in Ayurveda, right? What's the first thing that you do when you evaluate a patient? You talk to them, you listen, you understand their body's constitution, because what's right for me might not be right for you, might not be right for, Jane Doe in the next visit, right? So it's N of one medicine. And I think that's where, the functional medicine world works. I do a lot of precision medicine, genomics and things like that, as you mentioned. So, that's where that happens because we're not all the same. But I think the one invariable unity throughout every person I've ever seen, with the exception of maybe one or two, is we need to improve diet. We need to improve lifestyle, right? That's key. And even just incorporating, as you mentioned, one or two Ayurvedic principles a week is huge, right? Like is such a big deal.
True. Yeah. I mean, Ayurveda is truly a preventive lifestyle. The whole thing is preventive. And people will ask
Yeah.
me sometimes, is Ayurveda spiritual? Is it these things? I said, it's actually an entire way of life. It's the science of how we should live. And once we live by that lifestyle, all of a sudden we start to see the body works more easily. We're not battling with our bodies. The body's kind of flowing downstream with the river of life. We're in flow with nature. We're in flow with the rhythm of nature. And so instead of constantly feeling tired, fatigued, low energy, and kind of like toxic in a sense or polluted, then instead we feel whole and we feel nourished and
Yeah.
we feel vibrant. And so that's always my goal from Ayurveda, is bring body, mind, and spirit into alignment. And you're mentioning all the different tools that we use to get there. There's herbs, there's lifestyle, there's diet, there's sleep is a big focus of ours, gut, and
Huge.
then managing really the self-care rituals that help you build a rhythm and also help you detox, because we want that seasonal, daily, and annual big detox to happen to support the results. And so, as you've done this work with clients and patients, what kind of results have you seen?
Oh my gosh. I mean, for as you know, I've probably treated thousands of heart attacks, which is high stress and, high risk, high reward. We come out, we fist bump, we hug, all the great things. I mean, the fulfilling work is what I'm doing now. I mean, I've had several clients, patients, whatever they are, I'm supposed to call them, like, who are coming off of insulin. They've been diabetic, type 2 diabetic for years. One guy I can think of, he's like in his 70s and like late 70s. He calls me one day and he says, Dr. B, I'm so pissed at you. I'm like, oh crap, what did I do? Was there an email did I not call you back? He goes, how come you didn't come up with this 15 years ago when we put me on insulin?
Hmm.
Because what the work that we did with the diet, deep breathing. I'm a big proponent of deep breathing and vagus nerve kind of activation to help put us in that rest, repair, digest, relax mode. Took his body, I think, out of this constant fear and gave him that safety that his body needed to really heal and repair. And then with the nutritional work and supporting and getting, micronutrients and all that stuff back, we unlocked his mitochondria, got, as you mentioned, got his body to flow again. And he wears a continuous glucose monitor and realized that it had been about 3 weeks since he'd given himself insulin, and, shared this with his endocrinologist. And he said, yeah, I don't know that you need it anymore. And, 15 years of insulin, that's a lot of injections, risk of infection, kind of all of these things. Insulin, people might not realize, is a trophic hormone. It's like one of these horrible cycles, nature cycles that gets out of order. But when you're, insulin resistant, that means that you have higher levels of insulin to get the same glucose response in cells. Insulin makes you gain weight. And the more weight you gain, the more insulin resistant you become, right? So it's this really kind of crazy imbalance. And by putting him back in cycle with his body, back in flow, looking at morning sun, looking at evening sun, if all you do is just, if listeners come out with one thing from this podcast, eat when it's light outside and don't eat when it's dark outside, right? Just something that simple.
True.
Realigns your body, right, with what's happening around in nature. Go outside for walks, smell the smells, right? In the Japanese tradition, they talk about forest bathing and how we have these aromatic compounds that cycle. And like here where I live, they've planted a lot of eucalyptus trees. And when I take my dog for a walk, almost invariably I come back so much more relaxed because these natural compounds have effects on us, right?
Yeah.
And so, I've had patients in the program who, like I mentioned, these repeat performers. I had one guy who every year for about 4 years, right between December 20th and 24th, came in with a cardiac event, a heart attack. And it was almost, I could set my clock by it. I remember one year I was going to India for winter vacation. And I said, all right, I won't name his name here, but all right, let's call him Fred. All right, Fred, I'm going to be out of the country for 2 weeks. So if you're going to have a cardiac event, and we became friends over the years, right? Have it maybe on December 15th or something. And sure enough, he comes in on December 17th. I'm like, you got to be joking, right? He goes, no, I felt it. And we went in, I had to put another stent in. So he just had, and this was on top of great blood pressure control, great cholesterol. I had all the drugs and the injections and all the things that we're supposed to. I said, you know what, let's try something different here, continue the meds, but let's put you, this is as I was formulating the program. I said, let me put you on this thing that I'm trying out and see what happens. And it's now been 4 years since he's been in the inside of a cath lab, right? Because we're dealing with the underlying issue. And for him, it's something we don't realize. It was trauma from his work, little t trauma, that was driving this mental imbalance. And if you don't think the mind and body are connected, come on, this is 2025, right? So once we got him out of that fear of work state and safe, and he found a different position and all that stuff, it was all these holistic things, as you talk about, that really got him to a position of safety. And, I say this kind of tongue in cheek, as you're talking about your ortho people, and I was thinking about my heart attack folks, is, I hate to say it this way bluntly, but surgeons make money doing surgery and cardiologists make money doing procedural work, right? So for me to step out of that, it's challenging for the conventional model of healthcare, but I feel like ultimately it's the right thing to do. And looking at Fred, he's been out of the cath lab now and his life is so much better. We kind of unlocked him got him unstuck, inadvertently kind of took away some energy blocks that he had. And now he's thriving. He's crushing it. He's so happy. But that doesn't happen if you don't have a system that can do it. And again, I'm so grateful to whatever the universe, God, whatever you want to call it, the algorithm, whatever it is that put me in touch with functional medicine, because as a cardiologist, I think it's so central to what I treat, but there's so few of us that are actually doing this work. But this is the lasting work that we need to do. This is the type of things that cardiologists need to be doing if they really care for the people they take care of.
Absolutely. And it's interesting. I went through life with a lot of health struggles, went to a lot of doctors, took way too many antibiotics. And that's what led me to needing integrative medicine and Ayurveda, studied Ayurveda, and was like, why is no one opening this treasure chest in the West? What is wrong with Indians? Like, do they just suck at marketing so bad? Or have they not
I mean, think about chai.
systematized?
Now freaking Starbucks, you
Yeah.
get we had that stuff for thousands of years. And now
Oprah got
it's
into chai, and now
popular.
there's chai latte at Starbucks. Yeah,
It's
Ganeshas
everywhere.
are everywhere. So the Indian culture and the Indian religion, all of it's really spreading beautifully. Deepak Chopra really brought it here in a good way. But when I look around, I really think people don't understand how effective functional medicine is. I remember
Yeah.
when I finally became an adult and I started going to a regular primary care doctor. And as a woman, you end up going to the OB, and the OB can be your primary care. So I went to my
Mhm.
OB. I was ready to have kids, did the whole thing. Never thought, oh, I might need to go back to regular primary care endocrinology. And when I finally did, the guy had 5 minutes for me and he was like, you are fine. And I showed up with a whole long list. He goes, none of that applies to you. You're like
Yeah.
30, you're fine. And so I was at an Ayurvedic conference and I met a functional medicine doctor. She became a good friend of mine. And about a year into knowing me, she goes, you have a subclinical thyroid condition. You are totally bottomed out from having children. I now understand that you were a super motivated, super bright girl, and you are pushing a boulder up a hill every day. You're trying to launch a company, you've got a 2-year-old, and there's no gas in the tank. Let me show you
Mhm.
what can change. Let me show you what Armor Thyroid can do. And I was like, you're crazy. I won't take anything from a pharmacist. And when I
Yeah.
did, everything changed. And I thought, oh, y'all know something that my traditional doctors don't even have 5 minutes for. And so now that I've gone to functional medicine since 2020, really consistently, when I did at one point go back to a traditional primary care doc, because a lot of my friends are like, no, Shivani, we're not spending that much on our health. That's crazy. We have insurance. So sometimes I try to find them a practitioner who will get it, who will prescribe, who will understand us. I'm still always so frustrated because I'm like, they're going to cover 5 to 10%, maybe 20% of what you need. And the one that I
Mhm.
did go to, she was like, well, I can't give you progesterone. I know you are postmenopausal progesterone. I can't give that to you without an annual mammogram. That is standard of care. And I looked at her and I said, I've given you a baseline because I had breast reduction surgery. So I've given you a real baseline within the last 2 years, but I'm only 40, 42. You're going to take 50 mammograms on me over my lifetime. And you
Yeah.
don't think that's excessive for someone who has no history? And she goes, no, that's
Well,
standard of care. And it was in that
yeah.
moment that I thought, y'all will never be my people. Like we are on two sides of a war line here. And
Yeah.
I don't know how to convince the world that functional medicine is where it's at. Functional medicine is there to make the space for you to dive deep, to meet you where you are, because we're all at different points. Like you said, we're also bio-individual. So how do you
Yeah.
explain that to people? Because I'm still trying over here.
Well, I mean, I think it's tragic that standard of care really is really throwing the baby out with the bathwater, right? It's the opposite of personalized medicine, right? It's like communism medicine, I guess we can call it. Everyone's the same, but that's not how medicine is, right? That's not how it should be. I mean, we all have different exposures and things. And by the way, I mean, I've said this for years about mammogram: is you're taking a tissue, right, breast tissue, that is exquisitely sensitive to a lot of different inputs. You're smashing it, you're irradiating it, and you think you're not going to cause more cancers that way? I mean, there was a recent study that came out that said up to, and I don't remember the exact statistic, but up to 20 something percent of cancers are actually caused by medical imaging. Like, we're giving people ionizing radiation. I mean, it was a sobering stat, and it seemed a bit high to me,
Yeah.
but I don't know what the back end, what that is. And from a person that, used an x-ray camera for, 20 years, I wear the protective equipment and things, but I'm like just waiting for my cancer. In fact, I had a cancerous, non-malignant growth on my finger from being in the x-ray field. So yeah, we have to be, it was excised and luckily everything's okay, but we have to realize that, standard of care, we have to question, right, if this really makes sense. And, and for someone to just dismiss, I mean, that's just what frustrates me is that, in 7 minutes, like how much can you actually learn about somebody? And if you don't fit into this standard bucket, then you get kicked out.
Yep.
I was saying this on a different podcast I was on yesterday, but we're, doctors and people are so worried about AI taking over, healthcare, and our doctor is going to be needed and all these things. And I actually see it the opposite. I think AI actually will at least bring some reasoning and thought into medicine, because right now, basically you go to medical school and you become a series of nested if-then statements. If thyroid low, then give medicine. If blood pressure low, then give, and that's what we do. We're just shooting from the hip, never really giving time to think. And when someone like you comes in and actually is very deliberate and intentional about your healthcare, you don't fit into a standard bucket. Then what happens? It's like when your 2-year-old wants to get the chocolate bar at the grocery store and you say no, because you're looking long game, right? You're saying no, it's not nutritional and this, that, and the other, and all they see is the immediate gratification. What does your kid do? They have a tantrum, like in the grocery store, right? And you're embarrassed as a parent, but then you're like, whatever, right? But kind of similarly, when you don't fit in a neat bucket, doctors gaslight you. They say either it's not important, or, it's no big deal, or no, you're not having the symptoms you're having. Your numbers look fine. That's one that always, or the other one that kind of grates against me is that's age appropriate, right? We're now reaching the age, I'm almost 50 here.
Yeah.
And so, someone said, oh, you know what? Like that's age appropriate. I'm like, says who? Like, what the heck? Like, I feel like I'm, still 18 on the inside and maybe not looking like I'm 18 on the outside, but what does age appropriate mean? That's such a garbage term, and I used it for so many years and now I'm very cautious about it.
Sure.
But yeah, it's just, there's so many things about the conventional world that are frustrating, and, and there's nothing more intimate than health, right? And like that Maslow's hierarchy of needs, safety and health, and these are foundational principles. And when you can't entrust a system to take care of your health, you're still paying into it, right? But look at our health outcomes and the health of the average American and all that stuff. If the conventional system were doing a great job, awesome, amazing, I applaud you, great, right? But we're spending more per capita with one of the crappiest outcomes of the civilized nations. Something's not working here. And so if you're saying, well, this is standard of care in a system that is a crappy system to begin with, like you said, I'm like, thank you, but no thank you, right? Bless your heart, as they would say in the South.
Yes.
I'm out of here, right? Yeah. Like, good luck to you.
Yeah. And I mean, I think women usually have that awakening when they go to have kids, because either you just accept that, okay, I've signed up for the system and the system's going to do what it's going to do, or you get to go hang out with the women who are doulas and midwives, like I got to. And I read a whole book on hypnobirthing, and it talked about how in the 70s, the way birth worked was women were checked into the hospital, they were gassed, and then baby gets like sucked out of you. And that was standard of care. Like standard of care was.
So that's how I was born. Like I was probably born that way then in the 70s, huh?
Yeah. So standard of care has been barbaric at many times, especially with women. And so when I read that, when I went to the hospital, I had a whole battle with my husband. He's Western and MD, so he believes in all those systems. And I'm very like midwife in my house.
And even more so, am I right? He's a surgeon, right?
Yep.
To my recollection.
Yep.
So even more so, he's like, cut it out. Like that's the only way to get it done.
He's like, there will be a surgeon in the room when my wife gives birth to a child. And I looked at him like, all right, we're going to have to learn to negotiate on certain things, but certain ones I can see now that I'm going to lose. So, okay.
Yeah.
So I had my doula in the room to guard my right to never have a C-section. Hopefully, obviously I don't have full control. But my point there being, standard of care to me is a load of crap. Like I don't consider that what applies to me if I have the preventive tools in my hand, if I have any control. And that sovereignty over health is what I consider important. But we have to do everything you've talked about today. We have to take that control back. We can't be lazy. We can't say, you know what happens, or this is just part of aging. I'm going to feel and look 50 when I'm 45 or whatever that may be. We have to say, wait, I'm not getting the answers I need. I need to find a different type of practitioner. I'm having one of those years. 45 is quite a year in perimenopause where I'm like, okay, new team needed. Yeah. I love all my practitioners, but different team needed to deal with the issue.
in the longevity world, there's two major kind of jump points, age 44 and age 60, right?
Yeah.
So you're right there.
I saw that and I
Where,
was like, that's so true.
yeah, you get some sort of weird change, and then all of a sudden, like math doesn't math anymore. Yeah.
Correct.
So,
And every woman I know has gone to OB, she's gone to primary care, and they're all like, sorry, just deal with it. And I'm like, deal with it is not
yeah.
the answer. It's
Well,
complete revamp of lifestyle, address root cause. Why are you hitting perimenopause and menopause inflamed, gut microbiome disrupted,
right.
circadian rhythm is off, high stress, high cortisol, while your hormones tank, while we're dealing with the stresses of being the sandwich generation? Let's look at that for a minute. And let's talk about that. One question I have for you, being in cardiology, over the years, did you notice what is now becoming such a big topic, which is women's hormone health in menopause and the
Oh, yeah.
level of cardiology and cardiac events they were happening? Was that even a conversation before, or is that just a conversation now?
Yeah, no, absolutely not. I mean, I think that the average cardiologist, when they hear the word hormone, like sprints away faster than Usain Bolt, right? Like we just don't want to deal with it. But as a cardiologist, in retrospect, I think I was really kind of very front line in recognizing when perimenopause starts, right? And what do I mean by that? Well, we get annual cholesterol checks, and you'll have a woman who's LDL, the quote unquote bad cholesterol. That's a whole other debate, right? But bad cholesterol jumps from like 90 to like 110, right? We're not like sounding off alarm bells or anything, but all of a sudden there's there's a little bit of a jump, and it doesn't meet criteria or threshold for us if they hadn't had a heart attack or something before to do anything about it. But that's a sign of that estrogen drop, right? That's affecting the way your liver is making LDL particles and synthesizing cholesterol and all these things. And as we talk about the benefits of hormone therapy, I think that unfortunately they had a bad PR agent, because when we think about hormone therapy, right, the party line is, oh, it's for hot flashes, and it's for, hair falling out, or it's for, erratic emotions or whatever XYZ nonsense, right? But really we need to think of hormone therapy as cardioprotective, right? Because it is. We have to think of it as brain protective. Why? Because it is. We have to think of it as bone protective. Why? Because it is. And oftentimes as a cardiologist, I would see a woman in her early to mid 40s, right? So 44, right? We talked about that being
Yeah.
the ledge. And all of a sudden the cholesterol bumps, and I would say, your cholesterol bumped. What was the first thing I said? Oh, you must be eating something, off, or you must be not diet. I think you should just watch your, and this is the
Yeah.
pre-intervention or pre-functional Sanjay, right? Like, oh, like there's something you're doing wrong here. You are making a conscious decision to do something that is unwinding your health. So therefore it is your fault. And I'm going to, deputize you to figure out what it is and take care of it. And now it's talk about facepalm, just horrible, because that's not the right thing. The right thing is say, okay, oddly, out of nowhere, right? Your cholesterol has now jumped up 20%. It's still below threshold, but the root cause of this is not a diet or lifestyle indiscretion. I mean, if it is, then map that out, right? But, you know, there's a hormone issue at play here. Maybe we need to start thinking about going on hormone replacement therapy. It would be a remarkably awkward conversation for most cardiologists to have, but I would say so was the initial conversation about smoking, right? I remember when I did my training in the 90s, and it was so uncomfortable telling a patient who reeked like Marlboros coming into my office saying, you know what, you got to quit smoking. Oh, what are you're going to take my cigarettes? What else? I trained in Indiana, so everyone was like pissed off about smoking. What are you going to take away my cigarettes? Well, I might as well jump off a bridge. I'm like, well, I don't think that's the same, but you're doing something actively here that kills you. And we got through that conversation. Now, it's one of the biggest public health wins, is, the incidence of smoking has gone down so significantly. So we need to normalize that conversation, or if not, as a woman, find a cardiologist like me who's comfortable having that conversation, right? Come see me in a telehealth practice where I can say, okay, and I know your normal cardiologist or is not going to deal with this. And probably even a lot of PCPs, primary care docs, I think don't realize this. And I'll say, but, let's get you on some estrogen progesterone because we need to maintain your heart health, your bone health, and all these things. And that's the way we need to reframe that conversation, right? So getting back to your point, yeah, I think women were done a horrible disservice by the Women's Health Initiative, WHI, which is the poorly done paper, right? The
Yeah.
poorly interpreted paper
Correct.
that really cast a shadow on hormone therapy for a generation and a half of women.
Wow.
But now, fortunately, just like with Ayurveda, the science is really pointing to the truth, right? And we're seeing that this needs to be brain protective, and even for that matter, testosterone for guys. Similarly, had a black box for years because they were worried about cardiovascular events and things. And we realized that synthetic hormones are not the same as bioidentical hormones. And when you give, listen to this, when you give your body what it was designed to do, it works a lot better than when you give it something artificial, right?
Welcome to Ayurveda.
Newsflash. You're right. That's why I was kind of smiling as I was saying that, because you give your body the fuel that it's naturally designed to run on, be that hormones, be that food, be that sweeteners, be that whatever, and it just works, right? And it's all this ultra processed, all the stuff that we are now thinking, needs to happen in our lives in terms of the foods we eat, that take away. And I just wanted to call out prana, right? Prana is a breath, the life force. And kind of one of the things that I always think of is, that any food I eat is either advancing my life or killing me, right? So what you want to do is take on foods that have prana, that have life force, and that's natural foods. That's not something in my shelf that sits there for 12 months and, and doesn't live, but it's something that can actively rot. Like there's a shot clock on bananas. Oh my God, I bought bananas at Costco the other day and they're already kind of going brown. So I'm telling my kids, you guys got to eat like 2 or 3 bananas a day. Why? That's the life force, right? What is the rot? The life force is depleting.
Yeah.
So you want to get them when they have that great life force because it nourishes your body, nourishes your soul. And so, I had that thought more times than I realized I would when I say, all right, is this going to advance my life or is this going to take away from me? Right. And, just something that simple, that little mind shift, it bleeds into every single food decision or, an ingestion decision that you make. Like, not that it is right or wrong, but I kind of stopped drinking because I realized it was probably sucking away from my life force, not adding to it. Why? Because a bottle of scotch can sit sit in a barrel for 20 years
Right.
and still be drinkable. It has no life. It has no soul, because anything with a soul can die, right? And so, it just doesn't serve me anymore the way that I thought it used to. I'm not saying I never have a drink anymore, but I'm much more intentional about it, right? So it's these little stupid things that you learn in the functional medicine world, in the cardiology, in the Ayurveda world, that I bleed into cardiology to make it make sense. And the outcomes are, just remarkable of what I'm seeing. I mean, weight loss, I say, is almost a side effect of good holistic health. And that, in my program, I see that people are dropping 20, 30 pounds. We just had a guy 38 pounds in 6 weeks, just eating the right foods and getting the sleep that he needs and doing the deep breathwork sessions to relax his mind. And now he's like, oh my gosh, I'm so much less angry. You mentioned mood and stuff. I mean, when you heal the microbiome, like his anxiety has gone away, his sleep is better, his spouse is happier, all of these things just from taking that pause to live the way that we're designed to live. And in a sense, I guess, pushing back against it's not really pushing back against modern lifestyle, but integrating kind of the way that our bodies are supposed to live with modern lifestyle. And you just work better. You just get unstuck.
It's true. No, it's very true. And honestly, that was a beautiful way to wrap us up today, because Ayurveda does have so much beautiful ancient wisdom to it. The lifestyle, the toolkit, so much wisdom in terms of how to use those tools, and a simple way to do it for free, which is what we talk about with lifestyle, circadian rhythm, and all these things. So before we wrap up today, because I know I've taken up almost an hour, and I know I'm not supposed to do that on a podcast. We're supposed to cut way sooner, but I love having conversations with practitioners like you. I feel so encouraged about the future and what's happening in medicine when I talk to a practitioner like you. So Sanjay, do you have any final thoughts you can share with us today, and where our listeners can find you today?
Sure. So, I mean, I think of all the things that we talked about, one of the things that I think is so central to everything is sleep. And we didn't touch on it much, but if people just, have one takeaway, 7.5 hours, that is the ideal time. I'm not saying it's easy, and I've got troubled sleep since the beginning of time. And so it's something I'm constantly working on. But aim for 7.5 hours. That would be 5 90-minute sleep cycles for most of us. And just, if all you do is that, your brain will work better, your body will work better, all of those things. To find me, a couple of places, super active. My most active social platform is Instagram. So it's Dr. Sanjay MD. So DocTorSanjay MD. So follow me there. If you're looking for me on the website, my website is lagunamedicine.com, Laguna medicine.com. And there, if you are looking, you can work with me as a private patient. On the telehealth side, currently I'm licensed in California, but opening more state licenses everywhere. So if you're looking for kind of a functional medicine, heavy cardiologist, heavy hitting cardiologist, we can do that. Or if you want to talk about my Well 12, my diet and lifestyle program, that's a even easier way to work with me. You can go to Laguna Medicine, sign up for a discovery call with my team, and we'll be happy to share with you, what our program is, the benefit, and just the life-changing transformations that are happening on a daily basis without meds. And what I love is we actually are, working with practitioners, the conventional medicines, to take people, or conventional docs to take people off of their medicines, not add more, because we're really bringing the body back into balance, which is the goal of Ayurveda, right? So boom, there you go.
Awesome. I love it. Well, thank you so much for coming onto the podcast today, Sanjay. This has been amazing. You are a wealth of knowledge. We'll have to have a whole sleep conversation in the future, because I'm obsessed
Absolutely.
with sleep as well. And I want everyone to understand that's when we win at inflammation, is if we can really sleep well. So thank you for joining me today. And thank you everyone for joining us on the Fusionary Health Podcast. To learn more about this podcast, you can visit shivanigupta.com. Stay well, everyone, and I'll see you next week. Thanks for joining me for this episode. Check out our sponsor, Fusionary Formulas, the potent turmeric supplement used by doctors around the U.S. for patients with pain and inflammation. www.fusionaryformulas.com. I'm your host, Dr. Shivani Gupta. For more, visit shivanigupta.com. Subscribe to this podcast in Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Click the follow button or subscribe in any of the apps that you use. That's all I've got for you on the Fusionary Health Podcast this week. You have the power to transform your health and achieve vibrant health starting today.